Hi, welcome back. I want to talk a little bit today about the pitfalls of working for a Chinese company. Um, Many of you, if you're planning on coming to work in China, you'll wind up getting a job with a company where most of the upper management is Chinese and not foreign. Although you will find there's a lot of companies that are a mix, and I've worked for in both situations. I've worked in a company where my upper management was Chinese. I've worked in companies where upper management was Western, and there are some significant differences, and there are some things you need to be aware of if you do take a job with a company where you as the talent are a foreigner, but everyone else you work with is Chinese. And a lot of this has to do with the differences of Chinese culture. I want to preface this by saying I'm not in any way coming down on business practices in China. I certainly have some negative feelings about it, but most of those negative feelings come from the fact that I'm not Chinese. And so when you make the decision to go live in a different culture, you have to understand that the expectations you have about how things are going to happen are just not realistic. And so if you do wind up taking a job in a company where you're one of the few foreign workers in that company, or the foreign workers represent a class of worker within the larger organization, there should be some things that you're aware of that can be very frustrating if you're not. So the first big difference between I think Western companies and Chinese companies are the expectations for work. You're expected, even if your job is as a teacher or a musician or any sort of job, the expectation is that you will work even when there's no work to do. This was difficult for me coming as a classroom teacher in the United States, where I was free to work when I wanted to work, in the sense that if I was teaching classes, I needed to be in school, I needed to be present for my students. My contract stipulated in the United States that I got into school at 7:30 in the morning and I could leave at 2:30. And my personal feelings about that were that I wanted to go home and correct papers. I didn't want to stay at work and do more work. So I was free to leave when my duties were finished. When I came to China, I discovered that it was expected that I would work a full 8-hour day. Now, that doesn't sound so bad, right? Except that, especially in many businesses in China, lunch is a 2-hour period of time. And that, to me, is ridiculous, and to most foreigners ridiculous. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even an hour for lunch would be fine, but that was not included in my work time, so I was actually expected to work essentially a 10-hour day. And so that is a big difference in terms of the perception of working hours. That 2-hour lunch break is a time for you to take a nap. It's a time for you to relax, meet a friend for lunch. But to most foreigners, to most Westerners, I always say, you're kidnapping my time. That's time I could be working, and then I could leave earlier. But that's sometimes a hard battle to have here. The other expectation, a lot of companies in China actually work 6 days a week and not 7 days a week. I'm sorry, not 7 days, not 5 days a week. So there are some companies where you'll be expected actually to work 6 days a week with only 1 day off. So if that's something that on the surface you say, oh, I can live with that, think about it, because you may not be able to live with that after you do it for a month or two. So that's another issue of work expectations. And the other thing is that, and I still, after 3.5 years, don't understand this, but especially in the Chinese public school system, but even in the entire country, when there is a holiday, I'm trying to think of a good example, a holiday falls on a particular day, you're given a 3-day weekend, but because the holiday falls maybe on a Monday, you know what? I can't even explain this, so I'm just going to explain what happens. What basically happens is sometimes you have to work on a Saturday or a Sunday. The entire country does this. So if there's a holiday that is a vacation day, and it winds up taking away, because it's combined with a weekend, winds up taking off more time than you should, then you have to make that time up. So very often you will find the entire country going to work on a Sunday. Not just you, not just your job, but literally the entire country. Take a sip of my Starbucks here. So, so that can be a little bit confusing and alarming. The other big issue that's going to be very different is in China, a lot of things are left ambiguous or unknown. There's not the Northern European and American penchant for really scheduling everything out. So you won't necessarily know when your vacations are. You won't necessarily know how long your vacations are up front. If you're working in a school system or you're working for a training school, that will probably end classes and give teachers some vacation time at the end of the semester. You won't know when that is, and so you won't be able to book your flight early. You may also get information, and then later that information turns out to be incorrect. They'll tell you that your flight, the last day of work is on June 15th, and then you'll book a flight, and a month later, now we're in April or something, and they'll say, oh, it's June 20th, actually, sorry, we made a mistake. And so that can be very frustrating for someone coming from America, from England, Australia, where I think we're much more used to very clear plans and indications of when we will be working, when we won't be working. Sometimes work will be canceled at the last minute. Sometimes you'll be told you'll have a particular day off, and then right before that day off, they'll say, actually, you know what, we don't have that day off. We had planned for a workshop day or a free day for field trip, and whatever the situation is, you'll suddenly find yourself in a situation where the plans you thought you had are not plans, and that is just a part of Asian, specifically Chinese culture, where there's not a lot of thought put into long-term planning. People will not understand why you're getting bent out of shape about situations like that, and you should be aware of it up front, that nothing is set in stone, simply. The other things we should probably talk about would be sort of team building. There's a lot of if you look at an organization in China, whether it be a training school, whether it be a company, whether it be a hairdresser, whether it be a Starbucks, whatever it is, there's a real focus on the communal aspect of work, and you're part of a team, you're part of a family. The relationships within that organization are extremely important, much more so than in the West. And this can be confusing. It's very confusing for me and difficult for me because in my professional career, I've always separated my work life from my personal life, and I've worked with people that I don't like, and I've always managed to maintain a cordial relationship with people that I don't like, although a distant one. And I think in situations where I've had conflicts with people in my professional life, we've always managed to work together, but we never pretended to be friends. And in China and in most Asian cultures, there's a lot to the outward presentation of friendliness and camaraderie, even with your worst enemy. And so that can be confusing, again, for foreigners who are used to keeping professional relationships professional and personal relationships personal. That doesn't mean you can't have friends at work. We all do. But we sort of separate the friendship from the professional relationship. And in China, that's generally not the case. And so, like team building as an example, when your manager says, Saturday after work, we're going to go out for drinks, you have to go. Or we're going to go out to KTV. You have to go. You can't really say, oh, I can't make it. You have plans with your girlfriend, your boyfriend. You're planning on going away for the weekend on a trip by yourself to explore China, and on Thursday night, your boss lays down on you the KTV, the karaoke on Saturday night. You're going. Well, you don't have to, but you are going to leave. You're going to damage the relationship you have with your team and with your boss. So I highly recommend when the idea of team building comes up that you understand it is mandatory. It's part of your work. It leads back into the whole work time issue. So I talked a little bit about putting on a good face. As a foreigner, again, as a Westerner, you will find that in your life growing up, you know where you stand with people. You know when you have a teacher who doesn't really like you, or your teacher knows when you don't really like them, and then when you move into a professional life, you know when you and your boss maybe don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and maybe it might be time to look for a new company at some point in the future if you and your boss maybe don't like each other on a personal level. Maybe you and the secretary, you and the receptionist, you and the finance people, and there's a coolness in that relationship, and I think an understanding that we're still going to be professional. And in China, that's not how it works. If the personal relationship visibly breaks down, then the professional relationship is essentially over. And so you'll notice that in China that a lot of people will maintain a very friendly attitude towards you, even when you know and they know that there's a lot of dislike and maybe even bad blood between you because you've gotten into an argument. So my advice to you working in anywhere in Asia, but especially in China, is, because I can only really speak to China, is maintain that friendliness. Don't let your emotions show. When you do let your emotions show, make sure that you understand that you may be severing a relationship with the person that you're getting angry with, and it may be irrevocable. So keep that in mind, is that there is a level of show, of putting on a friendly face in public and being angry with a person later. For foreigners, that can be difficult because sometimes someone is so friendly to you and you think there's a good relationship, and maybe you open up to them and they actually turn out to be working against you. And that can be very frustrating because normally you know the people who are working against you. And that gets into the politics. One of the things, when I first came to China and visited, I thought, this is a truly amazing place. It's growing so rapidly, they're so successful. And I remember having a conversation, or sitting at a meeting actually, with someone who said, when I was a kid, they said that Germany is going to eat our lunch. And Germany didn't eat our lunch, speaking about Americans. And then when I got a little older in the 80s, it was the Japanese. The Japanese are going to eat our lunch. Well, guess what? The Japanese didn't eat our lunch. And then he said, now everybody's saying the Chinese are going to eat our lunch. And the Chinese aren't going to eat our lunch. And at the time, I was very new to visiting China, and I said, you're wrong. Chinese are definitely going to eat our lunch. He was right. The Chinese are not going to eat our lunch. The amount of effort that people put into relationships and politics in their small workplace here prevents them from being productive, to be quite honest. And that's my professional judgment. And speaking as an amateur anthropologist, it's true. People in offices can't seem to let politics lie. Everybody's got to have their alliances. Everybody sort of works with their department against the other departments. There's not a lot of teamwork between departments. I've seen this in a lot of organizations. The mantra here is, that's not my job. If you want help from someone, it's not my job. They're not going to do it unless you have groomed a personal relationship with them. So in the end, it's horribly inefficient. And I have a lot of friends here who are Chinese who recognize that, and I have a lot of friends here who don't recognize it. And they really revel in the political drama of, the finance department and the marketing department are just at odds. I've worked in organizations in America where two departments didn't get along, and everyone realized this was a dysfunctional organization. And here it's the normal run-of-the-mill for a Chinese company. So politics plays a big part in it. Understand that everything in your workplace is political, and that you should be aware of what impression you're giving, what you're saying about people. Don't assume that people you don't know very well who are friendly to you are your friends, that you can open up to them about your inner thoughts about other people in the company. It can lead to a lot of trouble, for you in general. So let's see. The other thing also that is, an Eastern culture versus Western culture thing is direct feedback. So I'll tell you a little story about something that really angered me one time, my first year here. I was teaching in a public high school, and as a teacher, I tend to dress professional but casually. I'm older, so putting a suit and tie on to teach really doesn't make sense. It actually separates me from my students, especially high school kids. So I tend to dress in like polo shirts, maybe nice jeans or dress pants. And one day I wasn't teaching. I was told that there were no classes that day. The students would be taking tests all day. And I came into work to just catch up on paperwork. And so I had no intention of seeing students at all. And so I broke with my normal tradition and wore shorts and sandals and a polo shirt or shirt like this one and went into work. One of the reception staff or one of the office workers saw me, and she said, "John, you look so nice today." Gave me a big smile. And I thought that's very odd for her to say. She never said anything like that before. And so there's the false friendliness piece. And I said, "Oh, well, boy, thank you very much." And then she said, "But Miss Nee saw you, and she said your dress is not appropriate." Or actually, she says, "You're really not dressed professionally today," was what she said. And you really can't wear shorts to school. And I said, "Yeah, no, I understand. Of course not. I'm not going to meet any students today." And she said, "Oh, well, no, you have classes right after lunch." And I said, "But yesterday you said we have no classes." "Oh, yeah, well, we do have classes." And so, yeah, you can't really wear those shorts. And I said, "Well, two things. Number one, wasn't told I had classes. Number two, if Mrs. Nee has a problem with my attire, she can tell me herself." And all the advice I gave you is sort of wrapped up in that one interaction: the false friendliness, the lack of, which I'm going to talk about next, the lack of sort of direct communication. And, you know, I told my friends in China, my Chinese friends, about this and how frustrating it was and how angry I got at this interaction. I got really angry about it. And they said, "Well, how would that have been handled in the United States?" And I said, honestly, it would have been handled so directly. My supervisor directly, my principal, my department chair would have walked into my classroom and said, "I need to speak with you about your attire. And that it's inappropriate." And I would have understood directly, without any sort of emotional attachment to anything at all, what the problem was. And that's not an expectation you can have here. So that's a very clear example of frustration that you can find here. The other thing also is that one of the cultural norms in Asia is a lack of directness, and this is seen as a virtue. And this is really, really hard if you're going to live in China. It's really hard to adapt to this if you come from a culture that believes in shooting from the hip, straight shot. You know, he's a straight shooter. He tells it like it is. Like that. Those are American cultural values. And in Asia, actually being direct with someone is seen as being childish. So telling someone what's actually on your mind that's what children do. Children want food. They say, "Mommy, I'm hungry." You know, an American wants you to stop calling them by a certain name. They say, "Stop calling me that." And that's seen as the same way a child would respond. So I know it's hard to understand, but look at it that way, is that the lack of directness you will find working with Chinese people is, for them, it's a cultural virtue. That person is being correct, morally, ethically. They're not hurting your feelings. They're cushioning what they're trying to say. On your end, that is going to be very frustrating. And very often, I've found it may help to have that conversation with people who are going to be providing feedback to you and just say, like, you really should tell me exactly what's on your mind and not beat around the bush, because it's better for both of us if I know exactly what's happening. It's not going to cause a loss of face for me. I want to hear directly from you. So that's important. And this is way longer than I thought it would be. The last point I want to make is that chances are you will be working in some capacity in paid education. It's very unlikely that you'll find a job directly working for a public school in China as a teacher. So chances are, as a foreigner, unless you're involved in a business setting, and again, I'm sorry, I can't speak too much to that, you're probably going to be in teaching of some kind, and you'll probably be in for-profit education. It's a business here, and one of the frustrating things is that the foreign teacher is often considered to be the icing on the cake for the parents and the students. You're very special, and the result of that is that you have to be very good, and you have to be very entertaining. And as a teacher, education isn't always about entertainment. It's not always about a clown, right? We can use humor. We can use comedy, physical comedy, to get our point across. But good teachers who rely on that as their sole method for connecting with students, they're not very good. There's got, education. Teachers know best. If discipline has to happen, it has to happen. And sometimes you're going to find yourself in situations here where if you're not the dancing clown, then the students are going to complain about that to their parents. The parents are going to complain to the company, and that can cause some problems. So if you get into teaching here, especially with younger children, understand that it's a product and that you have to sell yourself in a way that you might not be comfortable with if you're serious about education. Class has to be constantly fun, constantly entertaining, even with older students. So that's something that you should be ready for. It's something that a lot of teachers are judged on. The other thing that teachers are going to be judged on here, and foreigners in general, are going to be physical appearance. You're expected to be 帅哥 or 美丽, right? So handsome or beautiful. Of course, the good news is as a foreigner, what passes for handsome or beautiful is a little bit different, a little wider. But you have to look good. You have to be well groomed. You can't come in with a 5 o'clock shadow. You can't come in wearing sloppy clothing. You should look the part. So that's another expectation here. You'll be asked when you apply for jobs to provide your photograph. You're seeing if you're good looking enough to do the job, frankly. So keep all those things in mind. They're the downsides, again, of working within a organization that is managed and predominantly Chinese. If you find a job where your management is foreign, they'll probably have a lot of these talks with you about working with your Chinese coworkers. But at the end of the day, the company will be run much more like you're used to, which will give you some real advantages. So again, something to keep in mind as you're searching for the jobs. As always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and watch other videos. Oh, before I forget, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It should be right down there somewhere. And if you want to check out the next video in the series, it'll be up here. And if you want to check out some other videos about China, right over there. And then if you want to learn a little bit about anthropology, try going right down there. Thanks again for watching.